This is the lecture for the interior intervention assignment. For this particular assignment, I would like you to choose a space that you are able to manipulate, either using specific materials, potentially using subtractive methods with tools, and you are safely able to use this space with permission. The idea behind interior intervention is really going to focus on the idea of installation art. So, the artists that we are going to look at approach space in some really unique and interesting ways. First artist we're going to look at is Doris Salcedo. Doris Salcedo's work often references the human body by using found objects such as chairs or shoes to represent the loss or kind of like the cavity of a human. And in this case, she wanted to create a crowd like feeling between these two buildings. So you essentially feel like people were there and the chair is acting as a surrogate. Other artists approach space in some really great and interesting ways, like Subto Gupta. He ended up filling these arches with several metal objects. A lot of them are pots, pans, different containers, and he's completely immersing and filling this space. So, you can consider the idea of using found objects as a potential material, or you can take an approach like Liza Liu, where she is completely manipulating an interior with another material. So in this case, these are all different kinds of beads. And this was a full kitchen installation done at the Whitney Museum. So it filled up an entire space, large scale. Yayoi Kusama, she makes several installations like this. These are all different types of stickers in different colors. A lot of her work's inspired by her psychosis growing up. She had some pretty severe mental health issues and had a lot of trouble with hallucinations. So she'd get obliterations of light, or, she had um, a lot of trouble with sight. So oftentimes during her installation, she wanted her viewer to kind of have that same feeling of just being consumed either by like color or light. So a lot of her installations are kind of along that vein. So if you're interested in this type of work, she has several pieces such as the Infinity Rooms or the Obliteration of Fireflies piece. It's also another good example to look at. An interior intervention can be very formal, or it can have some subdued elements in it. For example, Pei White. Pei White often does these installations that are viewed one way, like this, but if you look at the way the wall is positioned in this image, it spells out text. So, there's definitely different ways you can think about how you use material to kind of subdue certain things. So, this is a really good example of an interior intervention. Vahit Tuna, this piece is a public art piece, and it has a really sad background to it. These are representing all of the women that were murdered in Turkey due to domestic violence. And each pair, these are all high heels on the side of the mounted on the side of the buildings here, represent each woman that was unfortunately murdered because of domestic violence. So, this piece has a lot of impact and, talks a lot about these really horrifying statistics. This is an artist named Daku who's using text to manipulate space. So, you can think of something as simple as, light and shadow. These are all just different texts that, when the sun hits it, it'll come down and cast certain shadows on this pathway here. So, you can think about how that material is important and how that can change a space or alter it in a specific way. So, really think about, again, what you want your viewer to get out of your work too. For example, this artist, Crystal Wagner, She does a lot of installation pieces on buildings or inside of galleries or in different interiors. But, as you can see, she's making these forms in response to the space that she's using. And, in this case, believe it or not, these pieces are made out of really simple materials. It's made out of chicken wire and chopped up plastic tablecloths that are knotted over the chicken wire. So, as far as material, you can really work with just about anything. You can essentially make art out of anything. But, you can manipulate material to the point where it's kind of unrecognizable. I mean, you would never know this is chicken wire and tablecloths. Another artist that took a little bit more of a humorous approach to interior intervention is Banksy. So Banksy made this piece during quarantine, and when he posted it, he wrote, "My wife hates it when I work from home." And he ended up doing this interior intervention with all of these rats and, having them kind of wreak havoc all over this bathroom. So, your space can be really unique. I mean, it could be something like a bathroom or a closet. It could be a living room, a dining room, kitchen. Um, it could even be something as strange as like a mailbox. I had a class I took on installation art where our professor had us make miniature installations in mailboxes. So, you can really get clever with the kind of space that you're using. So, here's an example of somebody that manipulated the space just with really, again, more simple materials. These are all clothes that are turned into carpets that are all over this house here. This one here, this is all Legos that were all in cracks and fissures in the wall. So I thought that was a really great idea for an interior intervention. Now, this next artist, she makes these really involved interior interventions, installation pieces. Um, but I think a lot of you really enjoy her work because it has kind of like a whimsical quality to it. And, you know, she uses a lot of like really bright, inviting colors. This is Sandy Skoglund. This is Radioactive Cats. This is the piece she's most famous for. So she'll definitely take these different interiors and really consider, color, repetition, all of your design elements that, you learned about in previous courses. This is a really great idea of an interior intervention. And, a lot of it is, stuff that would be typically found in the home. I mean, these clothes hangers, and then having the furniture in a space. This is a good way of thinking of an interior intervention. And I have a couple more examples here. This one's a little bit more along the lines of the Radioactive Cats piece. But one thing I want you to notice is the way the images are taken. Like if we go back to this slide here, where it's all of the clothing on the floor and the using it as the carpeting, the image is okay, but it takes a little bit to kind of understand what's going on. Whereas, Sandy Skoglund's pieces, you notice they're really well curated as far as the photograph. And that's essentially with any art portfolio is you really have to make sure that that photograph is really working well for your piece. It's communicating what you want it to communicate, and it looks really clean cut and professional. So, really take a note from Sandy Skoglund and how she's really going about it. Because at the end of the day, those images are what's going to sell your portfolio. And then here's my final example of Sandy Skoglund. And again, I think she uses color really well, and I really love the way she approaches manipulating interiors. The last two artists kind of work a little bit more abstract expressionist, painterly, but I think it's a really great, interesting approach to interior intervention. It's much different than a lot of the artists we previously looked at. This is Sarah Z, and she often makes a lot of like these thin structures and builds with areas of color and light in order to create a sculptural piece. But then, To me, they kind of look like giant three-dimensional paintings in a lot of way. Like if you were to take a Kandinsky painting and you were to make it three-dimensional, I feel like that's kind of the vein Sarah Zay is in. And, if you look at the one on the right, same idea. She's using this interior, and, your viewer is supposed to kind of navigate around it. But, again, the overall feel is kind of like a, 3D Kandinsky painting. So, Sarah Z is an interesting approach, and then so is Katie Bell, who's also, I feel like she falls in a similar line to Sarah Zay. But, Katie Bell works a little bit more two dimensional. She is starting to kind of bridge off the walls and get a little bit more three dimensional. But, I think the way she's using the wood and canvas materials and kind of like building it out and using color to contrast things is working really well for what she's doing. So if you really are enjoying some of these artists that I'm talking about here on this lecture, definitely go ahead and look at them more in depth. They have a lot of really great examples for interior intervention in addition to what I covered here today. Also, be sure to follow up by checking out the articles for the assignment.